Welcome to Ahead of the Game, a podcast brought to you by the Digital Marketing Institute. This episode is a big Q&A where we explore an area of marketing through leading industry figures. I'm your host, Will Francis, and today I'll be chatting to two experts in career development and recruitment about the realities of job hunting in 2021. Both as we continue to navigate the coronavirus crisis, but also as we head into a post-pandemic economy, whatever that will look like. Morgan Cummins is a director of recruitment and coaching at TalentHub, where he specialises in helping people rediscover their peak performance in their career. He had an 18-year stint in advertising, and Morgan transferred his skills and knowledge of this industry into recruitment and career coaching, and he's now in his 5th year in this new adventure. Paul Farrer is the founder of Aspire, a specialist award-winning recruitment consultancy for the digital, tech, media and marketing sectors. Established in London back in 1992, Aspire now operates throughout the UK, but also in Asia Pacific and North America. By expanding internationally, Paul learned much about how an industry can operate very differently in different cultural contexts around the globe. Paul passionately believes that whilst undervalued, professional recruitment can change lives and transform organisational performance. Hello guys, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks Will, it's a pleasure to be here.
Likewise.
Yeah, it's great to have you. I am really looking forward to draining you of every last drip of knowledge you've got about one of the most valuable areas of work and business at the moment, and that is the matter of recruitment and employment, especially in this current climate. And I think to kick off, just to kind of set the scene, I'd love to ask you both really about the last year. You know, it's been a strange one for everyone, but how do you think it's been specifically different in the world of recruitment and career development? Morgan, what have you seen?
Our agency has actually just had its best performing month in our history in 5 years. Our pipeline going into the end of this year and especially the first quarter of 2020 has never been better. And what's different though, and what's really important here is that clients now are really embracing the importance of building these modern marketing teams, but also hiring for attitude, which is something I'd love to get into later in this podcast.
Absolutely. So do you think that marketing as a sector is booming because messaging is becoming more important?
What happened very quickly, Will, was if you could picture yourself in a boardroom, the CMOs and the chief digital officers were suddenly the first agenda item on the board's list, and they were the ones that were also getting the spotlight, but the attention that potentially they didn't get previously. You know, if you chart back on the stats on this, less than 10% of people from marketing departments make it to a CEO's position. And that's always been a disadvantage for that department. For the last 9 months, you know, the calls, engagements we're on is always with the marketing leads and the CEOs. So it really couldn't be a better time to shine, I guess, for our industry right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
It has been remarkable because to the point earlier of everyone retracting into their shells and everyone pausing and, you know, having their own moments of what the hell, their crisis almost. One of our biggest challenges in recruitment is to try and attract the most talented people, or the people are, if we get a brief from our clients, they often have a wish list of what industry or what brand to go scouting in. And people now, and it most definitely is a product of them being working from home, so they're not being pulled from pillar to post in terms of commuting and that, but the ability now to talk to people and for people to actually really listen and take stock about their next career move has been a huge shift. If you kind of think of it like this way, sometimes, unfortunately, when we call people, you know, our timing might be terrible. You know, now it's almost been, oh no, I can give you an hour of our time if you want, if you want to listen. And I definitely feel and believe that that's because people now are much more in tune to, they've been through a really tough time. They might have seen behaviors from their current company that they didn't quite like, or values, and now they're questioning their own purpose and looking for that now in their continued job search.
Yeah, and taking that onto the kind of interviewing process, because that's all happened through video conferencing and I guess mostly Zoom. And how are people finding that, both from the candidate and the employer perspective? Because I know from my perspective, when you interview people for a job, it's very much about the kind of chemistry. I mean, literally the chemistry in the room, like the pheromones and the way that the body language, those really kind of primal things that are quite hard to get over on Zoom. So how are people finding that from both sides?
You're missing the sensory, the gut instinct. We do have receptors in our gut, and that talk to us about these things when we're either being interviewed or being in the interview situation. So quite simply, because at the very start of lockdown, my clients, some of them were really struggling. You had 4 directors on a Zoom for the first time ever in some situations, and they were actually all competing with each other for airtime, and they weren't giving the candidate any chance to speak. So quickly, we had to set some simple rules of engagement and set expectations on both sides, because I think when expectations can be met, that can make each, especially the candidate, a bit at ease. The number one bit of advice, though, that I've been giving to both, but specifically to candidates, has been, you're at home. You're inviting someone into your home now, so you should be yourself. And you should be very comfortable being yourself, because you're doing it either in your bedroom or you're doing it in your home office or your sitting room. And essentially, you want people to hire you and not someone that you're trying not to be. It sounds really simple, but I can guarantee you, if for the listeners, if they focus, now they'll have to do all the prep, and I can go through that later. They still have to prep beyond the extra mile for the interview. But fundamentally, if they do all their prep and then show up to that interview by being themselves, that's going to put them at a massive advantage.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that's the real challenge I've had as an employer in the past, is separating people who are really good at interviewing from people who are really good and right for the job. Because, that there is something about, there is a skill in being great at interviewing, turning up and being great on the day, saying all the right things, showing, projects, and being really easy to get on with and likable, and having kind of creating chemistry and rapport with people. But then, that might not necessarily relate to your performance. And so I suppose for employers, it is, and employees, it is better that we have a more candid version of each other, right? I mean, it's a bit like dating, isn't it? It's a bit like being on Tinder with a picture of a big muscly Adonis, and then it's me that turns up at the date, and it's not really what was sold. So I think people should definitely be wary of reading about kind of interview hacks. But I think that's do you think that that's sort of unavoidable in what is an increasingly competitive marketplace? I mean, people really have to fight for jobs now, don't they? Paul, what have you seen?
Yeah, well, I think there's two bits you brought up there. One is from an employer's point of view, being able to assess the candidate, and that takes a discipline, and that's the discipline of scoping out what it is that you're actually looking for in the first place. And what I mean by that is you got the hard skills, and then you we'll look at what else we're looking for. What competences, values, or soft skills are we looking for? And then, right, how are we going to assess it? So that's fine. We're looking for these things. You might want to work out why you're looking for them, again, because sometimes people just go into a shopping list of stuff without seeing the relevance to the actual role that they've got. So it has to be fit for the role. But once they've worked that out, so what are we actually looking for? How are we going to ask? What questions are we going to ask to elicit that information and get an understanding of if the candidate is meeting those values, is able to demonstrate those competencies? And then just make absolutely sure that when they are going through an interview process, they're asking all the candidates the same questions in the same way, probing in the same way, not like a robot because you're talking to a human and each person's answer is going to be different, but you're probing in the same way that you're taking down the answers and drilling down. And then you need to make sure you have a scoring system of right, well, what weighting are we putting? This is before you start. What weighting are we putting on each of these categories? Okay, so you're looking at it after an interview. You're going back and looking at it and saying, okay, well, how are we actually scoring this? What evidence do we find out? Okay, it's really interesting. I really like them, but actually, they don't seem to have much evidence here to support that when we really dug down. And the other thing, and it's just like more time, so you do need two people involved really in every stage of the process, because if you have one person, is that their bias could already be triggering. Well, I quite like what they said about that and favour the scoring, and you need someone else to also be more objective. So from that aspect, from an employer point of view, employers need to do quite a lot more work than they currently do to create a system of fairness, but also of more rigor. The other challenge they have is just right at the moment the pure number of applications that they will get if they're advertising themselves and that type of stuff. I mean, you are talking hundreds of applications. They're not talking about tens. Literally, before March, it might have been tens or less. We're now into hundreds.
Well, that's the thing. And I know there's one thing our listeners will really want to know, and that will be out of that stack of CVs or applications, LinkedIn profiles, how do you stand out? I mean, I'd love to hear from both of you. What are your sort of tips for standing out in that pile of applications?
Just to see if Morgan and I agree on this. I'm interested in Morgan's view on how long a recruiter will look at an application for before moving on.
Yeah, great question, Paul. So, firstly, it's roughly 8.5. The time is 8.5 seconds. That's the time that's been qualified in a busy recruiter's job. Now, that's what I tell my candidates when they're coming to us, either looking for a job in a career coaching way. A good recruiter is spending way more time. The way we train our people is to actually start at the back so you don't get distracted and actually look at the unusual. Just this morning, I was amazed someone had gone through music school and got top marks on the cello and the piano, and straight away you're going, wow, that's a high achiever, But back to the candidate question of how do you stand out? Actually, the first thing I would advise the listeners to do is cut down on the amount of jobs that they're applying for and get focused on what they really want. Because if you think of it like a funnel, and if you're applying for everything, and as we all know, it's become so easy, like you can swipe left now to apply. If you're applying to a job in the marketing industry right now, here in Ireland, there are hundreds of other people applying. My advice is to actually do your research, really look at the industries that you are inspired by, that interest you, and start learning about them. So then when you have, and if you think about it in that 8 to 10 seconds, when you've tailored your CV or written a clever little note that accompanies your application, if it's direct or if it's into ourselves, because you have that deeper knowledge and you're not one of the people of many that are just applying, you're already getting into that 5%. So for me, quite simply, go deep on the ones you're applying for, but really know why you're applying for, and then make sure you can get across that you're going to be adding value to stand into that 5%.
Yeah. Paul, what would you say?
Well, I think it's a fascinating arena, and as recruiters, sometimes we can lose sight of what it's like to actually be looking for a job ourselves. So I do a fair amount of coaching, particularly with people entering the job market, more so than people in, but increasingly now more so with people in it, around the fact that looking for a job is a job. It's a full-time job. And there's a whole raft of things you need to think about and create within your job. And the starting point is there's a difference between men and women in applying for jobs. Men apply for anything, regardless of what skills, however close they match it, they just apply. And in a one-click environment or one-swipe environment, it's very easy to apply. Women, on the other hand, do not apply for anything unless they've read the job brief and feel that they've got at least 70% of what's required. And so this is quite an interesting difference between the genders when it comes to applying for roles just from the starting point. But there is 0 point in just applying for everything. The 0 point is always just cluttering up stuff. And you need to be more of a sniper. So that the starting point is trying to understand what it is you want to do. I know that's sometimes a really difficult question. And also with careers these days, and career also is a strange word now. Careers used to be things that lasted decades, and careers are now things that seem to last like 2.5 years before someone moves on to their next career, as opposed to the next stage of their career. I think, what is a career? I think definition of career needs to be need a redefinition. But generally speaking, most people aren't looking long term when they're looking. It is a job move. When I'm talking here about the roles that will be sort of if one's putting age, let's put seniority on it, probably up to operating director level, maybe senior manager level, just below that. People aren't thinking hugely long term. They go, it's job to job, 18 months, 2 years, on to the next one, preferably within the same company, but quite often the people get itchy feet and want to move out. Their peer groups moving on, they want to move on, get to a certain age. Shouldn't I be a manager by now? Status, all these things sort of come into it. But career planning, it's not. It's sort of job moving, if you want. But for marketeers, approach it as a marketer. You are a marketer, so you are marketing yourself. So as what do you do in marketing? Well, you do research. You look at the areas that you're trying to penetrate and get your product and brand into. You need to say, is the product fit for purpose, or what are the strengths of my product, and how will I position those, and what are the areas I need to develop? So what work would I need to do to go and get those? Where the market trends, what's growing, that type of stuff. Where the skills. So people should look at it a bit more like a project. They should certainly have a database of all the companies they've applied to, the contacts they applied to. They should be working on LinkedIn to connect with those people because their application may have fallen in, and unfortunately there are some companies that say, I've got 500 applications, I'm just going to delete 400 as those people are unlucky, and I don't want anyone unlucky working in my organization. Terrible practice, but it happens, okay, because people are time short. And then but as a marketer, you need to sort of slightly move more into a sales thinking process of actually connecting with the people who apply, who are advertising the jobs through LinkedIn, sending them messages, make sure that you're writing blogs, making sure that you've got content on your LinkedIn profile that's relevant to the marketplace and because a good recruiter, a good employer will be not just looking at your application, they'll be saying, oh, let's have a look at this person elsewhere.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually.
To develop what Paul said about you are a marketer, and play to your strengths and use those strengths to work out what it is you want to do next. I want to tell a little story about someone I knew a couple of years ago who came to me and was a real high performer in one of the big global banks here. And for that individual, it was easy. Not easy, but because of the sector that they worked in, they wanted to focus in on fintech. And in the Dublin market, it's booming in fintech. So I simply just challenged him on it and said, basically, well, what are you going to do? How are you going to get beyond the extra mile? And so what he did was he had 2 weeks over a Christmas period, and he researched. He didn't just go what Google fintech companies in Dublin. He went and did deep research, and he actually came up with his own top 15. He analyzed everything from the problem that they were solving to the changes in the industry, the changes in regulation from a European standpoint point of view. And he came back to me with this list of data on these 15 companies. Now, for me, that made it so easy to approach only a handful, because I was only working with 10% of that list, but I got him in front of 2 people. But then again, this guy had impressed me so much. I literally went, well, what are you going to do about the other 13 companies? He went away, he thought about it. And what he did was genius. He actually wrote, he got some really good headed paper, and he wrote the founders a letter. And in that letter, he paid them compliments. He gave the deep dive research that he unearthed, and he gave them some insights from his 20-year career. He ended up getting 10 coffees. And from those 10 coffees, 3 job offers. So if you want to go really beyond the extra mile, well, that to me is the best example that I can give.
That's a really good example, actually. Yeah, I mean, funnily enough, it's not unlike the world of digital marketing in a completely saturated landscape. The only thing that cuts through is high relevancy and going really deep on that, because that's what people connect with when they're faced with a million options, the stuff that kind of actually resonates with them. And that's a really good case study. That's definitely a good tactic for our listeners to think about copying. Hello, a quick reminder from me that if you're enjoying our podcast series, why not become a member of the DMI so that you can enjoy loads more content, from webinars and case studies to toolkits and more real-life insights from the world of digital marketing. Head to digitalmarketinginstitute.com/ahead of the game to sign up for free. Now back to the podcast. I mean, in terms of positioning yourself as an employee, where do you think, is now the time to focus on becoming a specialist, or are we a more valuable asset to a company as an all-round generalist? Morgan, what do you think of that?
It will always depend on the stage of your career that you're at. So if we're talking about people leaving college, getting just into the jobs market, the digital marketing arena, I believe that it's a really good start to take a specialism. And it could be in social, it could be in programmatic, it could be in analytics. But I believe that the modern marketer of the future is going to be a series of skills stacking. So if you think about it, they become a deep level expert in SEO. They rise to the top of their field in their industry. That will open up its own opportunities to then develop the skill set. As you move up the proverbial ladder, it is really important to think of it like a T-shaped skilled stacked person, so that if you're clear on your career plans and development, that that every 3 to 5 years you're going to push yourself to effectively get out of your comfort zone and add another new skill. And, as the technical skills rise, you're going to have to then look at the softer skills like public speaking, leadership, empathy, etc. But I do think as a basis, you need to know 10% more than the next person in the room, and develop that. And then once you know that you're kind of comfortable in that space, then I'd recommend that you start branching into other areas of expertise.
Yeah, that's sound advice. Paul, what do you think about specialist versus generalist in the current climate?
Well, I think there's two aspects to this. First of all, employers, hiring managers in particular, of course, are looking for a shortcut. So they just want someone. I'm looking for a PPC manager. I want a PPC manager, and so it's not laziness. It's they're under pressure. They've got targets to hit, budgets to achieve, campaigns to run, and they just want a PPC manager who can do the job. So there's sadly, in my view, not anywhere near enough transferable skills utilized within digital marketing environment. It's very much in silos, and it's quite ridiculous because the idea that someone who's a great PPC executive couldn't also be a great SEO executive or a paid social executive or whatever. It's just it is what they're doing, and frankly, if they want to develop and move into more strategic roles, they're going to have to know all different aspects of how everything is pulled together. So it's very important, even if you are doing one particular role in a silo, to develop your own skills, take time to develop your own skills, or put pressure on your employer to develop other skills to make sure you understand how affiliate marketing works, or even some more traditional methods of marketing, whether it's broadcast or even print, because it's all part of the marketing environment, and the end user, as in your client who's got the budget, okay, at any time as market shifts and things change, may want to start weighting a campaign one way or t'other, and that certainly might be out of your silo if that is the case.
So does that make people who have side hustles more attractive potentially? You know, people who are proactively pushing themselves outside of their comfort zones.
Personally, I think it depends what your side hustle is. If it's relevant, absolutely. I think I have heard feedback from some employers who interview people who've got side hustles, and the side hustle is quite a serious one, and they're worried how much time they're going to be able to focus on the day job that the employer is paying for. Other employers think it's fantastic that someone's got a focus doing something else. So there is. I don't think there's a right answer apart from relevance. So I think side hustles are, if they're relevant, are great, but many aren't, and so what they bring to the party, I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, again, absolutely. I think if you put yourself in the shoes of you not having a job right now, and back to the earlier point we discussed, of standing out, I know if you are able to point to a blog that you've set up, a website that you set up that sold X number of widgets in the last number of months or years, that's always going to look way more interesting. And in actual fact, what I see it the most is when we're hiring for some of our full service advertising agencies, where you could be, the best example I have is they were looking to hire social media specialists. And one of the nice to haves on our candidates going forward was that they had a side hustle essentially to showcase, and it was those people that got it. So again, back to the point, it needs to be relevant, and there has to be a balance. You know, if employer might go, oh God, I what happens? They could be a flight risk if this takes off. So, but I think to the point of trying to stand out, if it's relevant, and you can talk to the clear achievements you've delivered from it, absolutely, I think it's a great thing to have.
I think there's a real point here actually, which has occurred to me. There's, for those people who aren't working at the moment, don't consider yourself to not be working. So if you're not in employed labour, you need a change of mindset to say, I have a full-time job. My full-time job is seeking out my next job. So what am I going to do to be able to make that come to pass? Because you actually have an advantage over those people who are working, because those people who are working won't have the same amount of time. So when you're actually looking for jobs and competing for jobs in the market, there are some employers who unfairly attach some form of stigma to people who aren't working compared to those people who are working. But I don't take that as being the norm. It's definitely not the norm. You, as someone who isn't currently employed, has an advantage that you can start immediately, which employers, when they have vacancies, want people to start immediately. But you have a job, and your job is getting a job.
It's part about showing what you were doing with that time, isn't it? It's, you know, showing that you didn't just sit at home watching Netflix, waiting for something to land in your inbox.
Absolutely, and a great example of that is in the last few years we've seen sort of growth of influencer marketing, and someone who didn't have a job wanted to get a job in that, so they worked out, right, well, what do these people do and how do they do it? Not to become an influence marketer themselves, although that's the route they started taking and building up a fan base, and they did a particular thing around cookery, and started cooking these gluten-free, vegan type things, and started creating actually their own small following. They then actually targeted influencing marketing companies that had food categories, and started contacting the people in those businesses, saying that, look at what you're doing. you could have more clients doing this. This is the sort of stuff I'm doing. I can speak their language. And then equally started focusing on the influence in marketing companies and didn't have any food category, saying, you have no food category. And look at what's going on in this food category. So it gave them real, numbers, research of what's going on in the marketplace, spend, that sort of stuff. And actually, to start with, was thinking this isn't working. No one was talking to them. There is an interesting sort of vibe within influence marketing agencies, which it touches on the arrogance of it. But this person just kept going until they got noticed. They didn't get a huge amount of interviews, but they did land up with a job.
Yeah.
So they ended up they were brought in on fixed term contract to see what they could do for a period of time, and they converted that into a job because by then they were all doing their own thing. Now, interesting, their side hustle has continued. So they are now an influencer in their own right. So they've got two things going on. One's an influencer in the sort of vegan cooking world, and the other is actually working for this agency, working with food clients.
Yeah. So, having thought about recruitment, and they're great, there were great stories and case studies you share in there. It's really good stuff to know about. I'm also interested, really, in how people in a job, how that's changed so much. So many of us are working remotely, particularly in marketing, and I think we've become used to that. That's become the norm now. What effect do you think all this working from home is having on productivity and job satisfaction? Morgan, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's something Paul mentioned earlier, which I'm delighted we can get back to sort of chat about. Look, no doubt, productivity's gone up. The separation between home and office is not there, and people unfortunately are getting burnt out. And then that questions, and I'm not just people being burnt out, but so many people I've been speaking to really now have had time to focus on their next step. It could be their next step in their current company. It could be total change, career pivot, or it could be a change of scenery. But really, Paul nailed it earlier on when he said we used to be almost the call that people reluctantly took. The curiosity might have got the better of them. Now, when people are answering our calls, like it is minimum a half an hour of airtime we're getting. And for me, I always ask, things like, so timing, where are you up to? Describe to me what your dream role would be. I don't get very specific because I think it's a really tough question. And now people are actually standing back and saying, wow, yeah, I am actually considering this or that. And this is going to be into 2021 for employers. Purpose is, it was there, it's been there. Unfortunately, the amazing bunch of millennials get the blame for bringing purposeful ways of working in, but it really is there. And from speaking to my senior clients, their biggest challenge is keeping that culture going. They know, they're clever. They know that people are struggling at home, and they know, especially in digital marketing areas, their people are in high demand.
So you're saying that people are very productive, but that they're losing their grasp on company culture and maybe losing some of the job satisfaction? I mean, how's it impacting on the way people feel about their jobs and about their companies they work for?
Well, just think about it. So last week, at Collective in TalentHub, we had our best year in 5 years of business, and we couldn't really celebrate it. We couldn't, do something to note that properly, and that's just one example of a great achievement and no celebration. So that being taken away is, in my opinion, really affecting people when they're at home, and then when they hear of other opportunities, they're way more in tune. They're way more ready to think about what it is they want to do and who, more importantly, they want to do it with.
That's just to build on that point. I think there's been a paradigm shift, actually. Whether it shifts back again is another matter. But I think there's been a paradigm shift. I think those people who are in work, who are employed, have a different relationship with their employer now than before. in many ways, because people have taken some people have taken salary reductions, completely unthinkable pre-March 2020. If you wanted people to take salary reductions, they walked out the door, went around the corner, and started a new job somewhere else. So some people took salary reductions. Many didn't, obviously. Some people are still on furlough, so they're still employed. So their relationship with their employer is different. Many employees are, if I use the word carefully, more thankful to their employer because they know their employer isn't doing as well as it was. Now, obviously, some areas of e-commerce and digital marketing are flying, absolutely as if nothing ever happened. In fact, it's got better, but there's plenty of sectors within digital marketing where it's not been fine at all. Lots of people have found it really tough. And so there's not one size fits all. This is changeable everywhere. Then you look at this issue around culture, and I think culture is suddenly, I think to me, it's a problem word, because if we believe in diversity and inclusion in the workforce, okay, then whatever your culture is, unless it's already truly diverse and inclusive, you've got the wrong culture. And if you're trying to recruit to that culture, you are recruiting people that therefore are not going to meet your diversity and inclusion statistics. So I mean, there's lots of really big, massive statistics out there that people need to really get on board and get in tune with. And you talk about a workforce. 75% of employees will have had symptoms of mental health strains in the last year. That's 3/4 of the workforce, your workforce. And obviously those symptoms are going to be stretched one way or the other. You've got things like McKinsey report that showed that companies with a strong gender diversity are 15% more likely to outperform their competitors, and those with strong ethnic diversity were 35% more likely to outperform your competitors. So if you don't actually know what the makeup of your own business is, okay, how are you beginning to look at how are we going to start along a road of being inclusive? Because employees, as Morgan was saying, they want to make a contribution, and if they feel they're making a contribution, they feel valued. But feeling valued is feeling listened to, and feeling that you can share your voice and people are respectful for you, and that's all about the inclusion part. And when organizations, when employees feel that their organizations are supportive towards diversity, and they feel therefore they feel their ability to innovate increases an amazing 83%. That's not a figure from Pine Sky, it's from Deloitte research. So these are really important when it comes to companies now saying, well, what is our culture? Because our culture was table tennis tables, bean bags, free coffee, fruit, go-karting, out in the bar on a Friday, on a boat trip on Wednesday, taking everyone off to Barcelona for the weekend. And then you look at, particularly in digital marketing, particularly in digital arena as well, you look at a company's website, okay, and it's spot the grey hair. But the company's saying we're really diverse. Well, clearly you're not diverse. You've chosen a diversity. So I think everything is going to have changed. You take commuting time that's disappeared for people working from home. Aspire and ourselves, we did our own workplace trend survey, which showed that 87% of employees in digital marketing said that want to continue to have a great deal of flexibility working from home. But they also want to have an ability to work in an office environment where lots of personal relationships are built and all the rest of it. But I think the office that we thought we had, that environment, it has to shift if we're also at the same time going to be really emboldened to get really involved and committed to diversity and inclusion.
And I think as we look to the future, and our time is running short, I've just got a few more minutes to think about this. But as we look to that future, there is going to be yet another shift from what is now been normalised. There will be some sort of post-pandemic economy. And also, I think that we've forgotten about some other things that will overshadow that potentially. So things like automation and the effects of that. So I'd just love some closing thoughts and advice for our listeners specifically who are information hungry digital marketers. How can they prepare for a post-pandemic economy, essentially? Morgan, what's your advice to our listeners?
So, Will, if you think about it like this, your level of success in this new world is going to be determined by the level of work you put into your personal development. And just think about that for a second. No one else will really care for your career moving forward. No one else is really going to care if you upskill, if you spend time in your personal development. But I can guarantee you, if you eke out even 15 minutes a day, let's just say before your morning starts, 15 minutes and reading a book related to your field. If you were to do that every day of the year, you will have read 18 books in 1 year. And that's just 15 minutes. So for me, it's about taking ownership of your career, of your development, and investing in developing yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think there's going to be a sort of post-pandemic boom in job availability?
Well, we in TalentHub are already seeing it. Yesterday morning, we had a planning meeting at the leadership team to increase hiring for our own agency to keep up with the demand that we're seeing right now in terms of companies building these modern marketing functions.
Yeah, that's good. That's a positive note to end on for sure. Paul, how do you think our listeners can prepare for whenever it might happen, but a truly kind of post-pandemic economy where the world starts to open up again?
Well, most economists are predicting a V-shaped recovery. So therefore, clearly more opportunities are going to become available. At Aspire, on our own agency, in lockdown 2, we've seen week on increase of number of roles coming in. So people have already adjusted to lockdown 2. So post pandemic, vaccines and some sort of life as we used to know it should be a boom. The fact about yourself is that no one cares about your career more than you. In fact, you're the only one who really cares about it at all. So the best advice I can give is you need to spend some time identifying what it is you want to do next. Okay, and go and talk to people, go and talk to friends, colleagues, research, go and speak to recruiters. But you need to have a pretty reasonable focus on what it is you want to do next, and the type of role, the type of company, the type of sector, what it is you want to do. Because without having that purpose and that focus, you can get very lost. Rather like going to the department store saying, I haven't come with any idea of what it is I want to buy, okay, and you'll just walk around aimlessly looking and picking up stuff and not actually doing anything. Whereas if you went to a department store and said, I've come to buy a TV, you might have researched all the TVs before you went there, and you're going to go and have a look, and you've got absolutely in your mind what it is you want to do. And once you've got that, then you need to swivel or pivot in the more modern parley, and you need to put yourself in the employer's shoes, the hiring manager's shoes, and think, why you? Why, if I was that employer, would I have any interest in employing you? And work out what it is that they will be looking for. And there's so much information out there. You can go to companies' websites, look at job descriptions, all that sort of stuff. You can see job ads and say, okay, this is what they're looking for. And so that's right. Well, I need to be that person then. So what have I got and what am I missing? And whatever it is I'm missing, whatever I need to develop, I need to be able to demonstrate that I'm building up those skills, those competencies in that area. So actually, I am the full package. Once you've decided you've got that and you've still continued and you've got more to come, you then need to have a program, a really considered program. Right, I'm after this now. I've got a target list of companies I'm speaking to. I'm going to spend an hour every day on LinkedIn, building my network amongst those hiring managers in those types of companies I want to build a reputation with. I'm going to make sure that my LinkedIn profile, because that's where everyone is going these days, has relevant blogs, has relevant connections. I'm looking at the right stuff. I'm in the right channels. And that sort of stuff, and give them a real reason to engage with you. So when a role does come up, okay, either they're already approaching you because you're on their radar, or you're approaching them with some sort of branding. You've done your employee branding in advance.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks for that. That's really, really sound advice. Well, that's all we've got time for. Thanks so much for both of your insights. It was really, I think, really valuable for our listeners to hear from your perspective what the kind of prospects are for people who are job seeking today. So thanks very much for your time, guys.
Thank you.
I see, Will, thanks.
If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And for more information about transforming your marketing career through certified online training, head to digitalmarketinginstitute.com.